I always believed that betrayal is something that happens to other people, unfortunate women on the internet. Dramatic storylines in movies, or painful situations whispered about behind closed doors. Never in my life did I imagine that I would become the central character of such a story. And not just any story, but the beginning of the darkest, most humiliating chapter of my life, one that would eventually force me to rebuild myself from ashes. I didn't even realize I was sitting on. Back then, I was 40 years old, and my life felt predictable, not happy, not terrible, just predictable. And I clung to that routine because it felt safe. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. every weekday, made coffee, packed my daughter's lunch, kissed my husband on the cheek as he pretended to look rushed, and then headed to a job that drained me slowly each day. I didn't love my job, but I held on to it because the extra paycheck made me feel like I wasn't fully dependent on my husband. Even if I didn't know it yet, that small sense of independence would one day save me. My husband, Daniel, worked in corporate logistics, a job that constantly sent him on trips, shipping delays, warehouse inspections, regional meetings. I'd heard every excuse in the book. I didn't question it, not because he was particularly trustworthy, but because I was exhausted from trying to hold the family together, while silently hoping he would one day turn into the man I married. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't abusive, he was just absent. Emotionally, mentally, physically absent. I convinced myself that his distance was temporary, that once he got through this busy season, we'd reconnect. But I had been saying that for 8 years. There was always a busy season, a stressful quarter, a new project, a problem at work that required his full attention. I didn't realize, until much later, that I was living in a marriage of breadcrumbs, tiny crumbs of affection every now and then that I clung to like a starving woman because I didn't want to accept that the loaf had disappeared long ago. It's funny how women can sense betrayal before it's ever spoken aloud. There's a shift sometimes so subtle it feels imaginary, but unmistakable for the woman who loves too deeply. For me, the shift began one Tuesday morning. Daniel left for a 4-day trip to Chicago. He kissed me on the forehead, grabbed his suitcase, and rushed out the door. I noticed something strange the moment he walked out. He smelled different, as if he'd changed his cologne, a scent that was sharper, younger, almost playful, not the woody fragrance he'd worn for a decade. I told myself it was probably a sample from the store. Men don't put much thought into these things, right? But something in me whispered that this wasn't random. Still, I pushed the thought aside because I had no energy left to open another door of doubt. That morning, after dropping my daughter at school, I stopped at a small cafe. It wasn't part of my usual routine, but my nerves were restless. I needed something warm, comforting. As I stood in line, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. He landed safely. Don't worry. I stared at my screen, confused. There was no name attached to the number. My blood ran cold. Before I could process it, another message followed. He'll be with me tonight, so please don't call too late. I read it 3 times, trying to figure out if this was some twisted joke. My heart hammered. I typed, "Who is this?" 3 agonizing dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again, and then, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought this was Lauren's number. My apologies, Lauren." That name lodged itself in my chest like a shard of glass. I didn't know any Lauren connected to my husband, or so I thought. Before I could question further, the number blocked me. The barista behind the counter asked for my order, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing. I walked out of the cafe without buying anything, unable to feel my legs. My hands trembled so violently that I dropped my keys twice trying to unlock my car. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, and the realization began forming like a bruise beneath the skin, slow, painful, and unavoidable. Someone else knew where my husband was. Someone else felt the need to reassure me about him. Someone else knew his schedule better than I did. That someone else was the woman he was with. I didn't have proof, just a message, but woman's intuition, God, it's powerful. I knew deep down that this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a wrong number. It was a warning life had forced into my hands, and once life hands you a warning, you don't unsee it. I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I needed more. I needed to know for sure before I shattered my family on suspicion alone. So I waited. I watched, and unfortunately, I found more than I bargained for. Over the next several weeks, Daniel's trips became more frequent, longer, less believable. He became protective of his phone, turning the screen away when I walked by. placing it face down everywhere, even taking it to the bathroom. He started grooming more, shaving more often, styling his hair, buying new shirts I didn't shop for. He bought a new watch far out of our usual spending comfort zone. When I asked where he got it, he said it was a company reward for performance. Strange, because Daniel had never mentioned any reward system in 12 years at the company. The lie didn't sting. The ease of it did. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't happen overnight. It starts slowly, like cracks in a glass that you don't notice until your entire reflection is distorted. The moment the truth shattered my world completely wasn't dramatic. There was no lipstick on a collar, no suspicious receipt, no strange voice on the phone. It was a calendar notification. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel left his laptop on the kitchen table before heading out for an urgent supply chain call. He never brought his laptop home unless the trip involved presentations, but this weekend was supposed to be family time. The computer pinged. A small alert popped up on the corner of the screen. Dinner, 7 p.m. Lauren. My breath vanished. The heart emoji, the time, the name. I clicked the calendar entry with trembling hands. Location, Amalfi Trattoria, restaurant we went to for our 10th anniversary. A restaurant he claimed was too expensive to go back to. A restaurant he thought was special enough to take her. The note section broke me. Wear the black dress. I want to see that smile. He had told her what to wear. He had planned this. He had been romantic. He had remembered her favorite dress. Something he hadn't done for me in years. I felt something inside me collapse, fold in on itself like a dying star. All the denial, all the excuses, all the hope I had held onto it all crumbled. I don't remember crying. I sat there frozen, staring at the screen as if my eyes could burn a hole through it. My chest throbbed painfully, not just from the betrayal, but from the sudden realization that I didn't even recognize the man I had built my life with. Who was he? Who had he become? And who was I, that I allowed this for so long? I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. Instead, I did what betrayed women often do. I blamed myself. What did I do wrong? Was I not attractive enough? Did I become too comfortable? Did motherhood make me boring? Did I lose the spark? But self-blame is a slow poison. The more I drank it, the sicker I felt. And in that sickness, a small part of me buried beneath years of silence began to rise. A voice I had ignored for far too long. A voice that whispered, "This is not your fault. This is your awakening." For the first time in years, I listened. I spent the next few days observing my life with new lenses. Daniel's absence, his emotional withdrawal, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he shut down any conversation about the future. It all made sense now. He had checked out of our marriage long ago. I was the only one holding on, and deep inside I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I didn't want to. It was time to face the truth. Not for him, not for revenge, not even for answers, but for myself, because somewhere along the way, while juggling bills, parenting, household work, and trying to keep my husband emotionally alive, had lost myself completely. I didn't know who I was outside of being his wife. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I dreamed of. I didn't know what I was capable of. But I was about to find out, because betrayal, when it doesn't kill you, gives you an unexpected gift. It forces you to rebuild, and rebuilding creates empires. What I didn't know at that moment was that this betrayal wouldn't just shatter my old life. It would force me into a new one I never imagined possible, one where I would rise higher than I had ever allowed myself to dream, one where I would build something so powerful, so successful, so unimaginable, that I would one day look back on this moment and say, this was the beginning of everything. And so, part of my story ends, not with vengeance, not with confrontation, not with closure, but with awakening. Because before building an empire, you must first bury the ruins. I used to think the worst part of betrayal was the moment you discover it, the moment everything you believed, everything you trusted, everything you depended on, suddenly dissolves into lies. But I learned something far more painful in the weeks that followed. The worst part is waking up every morning and remembering that the person you relied on the most chose someone else, remembering that the life you built was never really yours, remembering that the future you imagined died long before you knew it was gone. That's where part 2 of my journey begins, not in the fire of betrayal, but in the ashes. Every morning felt like a fresh punch to the gut. Every room felt like it still held ghosts of arguments, laughter, promises, and memories that now felt poisoned. Every phone notification made my heart jump with fear that it was him again. Another excuse, another lie, another attempt to manipulate me back into the life he broke. For the first time in 17 years, I felt completely alone. And yet, for the first time in 17 years, I also had space. Space to think, space to breathe, space to ask myself questions I had never dared to ask. Like, who was I before him? What did I want? Where did my dreams end and his begin? These questions haunted me more than the betrayal, because the truth was, I didn't know the answers. Not anymore. 2 weeks after he moved out, or, more accurately, slithered out, I received a call that nearly sent me spiraling right back into the emotional pit. I was trying to climb out of. It was the bank. A woman with a soft, almost apologetic voice said, "Mrs. Lawson, we're calling regarding the accounts associated with your joint loan. You are currently 3 months behind." 3 months, 3 months behind on a loan I didn't even know existed. I closed my eyes and pressed my palm against my forehead. Of course he had left me with debt. Why wouldn't betrayal come with a price tag? I swallowed hard and asked her to clarify. She hesitated, then said what I already feared. There are multiple loans, some connected to your home, and a few connected to business ventures under your husband's name but tied to your shared financial identity. My blood ran cold. How much? I whispered. There was a pause, a long one. "Mrs. Lawson, the total balance is $148,000. I felt the room shift around me. My stomach dropped. My knees weakened. $148,000. A number so big, so crushing, so suffocating. It didn't feel real. I didn't even have time to process it before she added, "Payments must resume immediately to avoid further action." Further action, meaning foreclosure, meaning collection, meaning my credit destroyed, meaning my life dismantled piece by piece by a man who walked away without a care. When I hung up the phone, I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, silent, still, frozen. Because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It wasn't just heartbreak. It wasn't even humiliation. This was survival. Later that night, I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets. My hands were trembling. My breath was shaky. My mind was spiraling. How could he do this? How could he leave me with everything? How could he ruin my life and move on so icily? And then, something inside me snapped. A very calm, very steady voice in my head said, "Enough." Not loud, not dramatic, just firm, resolved, steady. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt something other than pain. I felt determination. I wiped my tears, stood up, looked around my house like I was seeing my entire life for the first time, and I whispered to myself, "This is not where my story ends." Then, I walked to my bedroom, opened my laptop, and made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life forever. Was going to rebuild everything he destroyed, but I wasn't just going to rebuild. I was going to rise. The first thing I did was pull up every financial statement I could find. Bank accounts, credit cards, mortgage documents, loan agreements, tax filings, emails, investment accounts, business registration forms, all of it. Every paper he had tried to keep hidden, every encrypted file, every password-protected document. I hunted it down like my life depended on it, because it did. The betrayal had stolen so much from me, but it also gave me something I never had before. A reason to understand money, a reason to understand power, a reason to take control of my own life fully. The deeper I dug, the more truths I uncovered. Accounts he hadn't told me about, investments he'd made without consulting me, properties he had signed for with my name attached, invoices from his business trips that weren't business-related at all. For years, he treated me like finances were too stressful and too complicated for me. He said he was protecting me from worry. He said I trusted him too much to need to see the details. But the truth was simpler. He didn't want me to know how much control he had, or how much control I could have had. So I studied, I learned, I taught myself the things he never wanted me to understand. Debt consolidation, credit protection, asset protection, freelancing, online business scaling, budgeting, financial negotiation, e-commerce, sales funnels, digital marketing, passive income strategies. Every night I read until my eyes burned. Every morning I took notes. Every afternoon I practiced. Knowledge became my weapon. Information became my armor. His betrayal became my motivation. There's a funny thing about hitting rock bottom. There's nowhere left to fall. And because I couldn't fall further, I could only climb. Slowly, painfully, but steadily. I started small. I began freelancing online content writing, virtual assistants, simple design work. The pay wasn't glamorous, but the feeling of earning my own money again after years of being dependent, it felt like oxygen. Then I launched my first small digital product. Then I started consulting. Then I began creating online content. Then I learned how to monetize social platforms. Each dollar I earned felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Each milestone felt like a step toward freedom. Each success, no matter how small, felt like proof that I didn't need him, that I never did. Before long, I went from earning $50 a week to $300 to $1,000 to $3,500. By month 4, I paid the first chunk of the debt he left behind. By month 6, I had fully separated our finances. By month 8, I had made more money on my own than I ever made with him. And then, something happened that changed everything. One evening, I was working late at a cafe, building out a project proposal for a client. A woman sitting a few tables away kept glancing in my direction. Finally, she approached me. "Are you a business consultant?" she asked. I laughed. I was still struggling with calling myself that, even though it was technically true. "I'm getting there," I said. "Why?" She sat down, leaned forward a little, and said, "I've been watching you. You're focused. You're driven. You look like you're building something." I nodded, unsure where this was going. "My husband left me 2 years ago," she continued. "I had to rebuild from scratch. I know the look of someone fighting their way up." That was the moment I realized something important. Women like us recognize each other. We carry a certain strength, a certain awareness, a certain fire born from being underestimated. "I need help launching my business," she said, "and I want to hire someone who understands the struggle, someone real, someone hungry." That night, I earned my first $5,000 contract, the biggest payment of my life, and it came not from a corporation, not from luck, not from someone rescuing me, but from another woman who saw my worth before I saw it myself. And that experience lit a fire in me so bright, so unstoppable, I knew there was no going back. That one client turned into 2, 2 turned into 6, 6 turned into a waiting list. Suddenly I wasn't just surviving, I was building a brand, a company, a mission, a legacy. Women started reaching out to me from all over the country, many rebuilding after betrayal, divorce, financial sabotage, or abandonment. They didn't just want financial help, they wanted confidence, control, direction, a way forward. And I knew that path intimately. I built courses, coaching programs, digital resources. I taught business strategy, financial literacy, online brand growth. I hosted live sessions for women, starting from zero, women who reminded me of myself. What began as a desperate attempt to save my own life became a community of thousands. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself, not just for surviving, not just for rebuilding, but for turning my pain into something powerful, something bigger than me, something that mattered. My empire wasn't born out of ambition. It was born out of necessity, out of heartbreak, out of betrayal, out of a fire lit by someone who wanted to see me destroyed. He underestimated me. He counted on me falling apart. He believed I would stay broken. He had no idea the woman he betrayed was the same woman who would rise higher than he ever imagined. I always thought the hardest year of my life was the year I discovered my husband's betrayal, but I was wrong. The hardest year wasn't the year everything fell apart. It was the year after, the year where every decision, every step, every breath felt like walking barefoot across broken glass. And yet, it became the year that shaped the person I would become. The year that forced me to look at the ruins of my old life and build something no one, not even he, could ever destroy. People love to romanticize divorce, especially when the woman walks away stronger or winning. But let me be painfully honest, there are no winners in betrayal, only survivors. My divorce settlement was the closest thing to justice I would ever get, but it didn't feel like victory, not even close. The lawyers negotiated for months. My ex acted like giving me even a penny was the world's greatest injustice. He who had spent years lying to my face, he who had drained our savings to fund business trips, he who built an entire fake life behind my back, now acted like I was taking advantage of him. But the truth, he feared one thing: exposure. He didn't want his reputation destroyed, didn't want his business partners to see that the family man was a fraud, didn't want his parents, especially his mother, to discover the truth. So he settled fast. I got half of our joint savings, the house, the small rental property we had bought early in our marriage, and a portion of his retirement fund. But here's the twist. Right after the settlement, I learned something that almost made me collapse to the floor. He had massive hidden debts, loans I had never heard about, credit lines he had opened behind my back, business losses he never disclosed. He wasn't the successful man he pretended to be. He was drowning, and he had been using our money to keep his image afloat. So even though I got assets, I also got his financial mess. Some days, I cried until my chest hurt. Some days, I woke up terrified, wondering if I could keep the house. Some days, I felt like I had gone from a wife to a failing finance manager of a collapsing kingdom. But here's something betrayal teaches you. You can only fall so far before you hit the ground. And once you do, you finally have solid earth beneath your feet again. One morning, around 6:30 a.m., I was sitting at the dining table with a stack of unpaid bills, my laptop open, and a cold cup of coffee beside me. I remember staring at the numbers, the terrifying total of everything I owed, and suddenly whispering out loud to myself, no one is coming to save you. Not my ex, not my family, not the justice system, not anyone I once trusted. It was just me. My whole life, I had relied on the illusion of partnership. I believed marriage meant shared responsibilities, shared burdens, shared dreams. But now, those dreams were mine alone to rebuild. That morning, something shifted, something subtle but powerful. I realized I had a choice: either let betrayal become the story of my life, or make it the origin story of who I was about to become. And that's the moment I decided I would turn the ruins of my life into the foundation of something new, something massive, something unstoppable. I applied for a part-time job. Yes, a 40-year-old woman with a college degree, sitting in front of a 20-something manager, explaining why she wanted to work as a customer service assistant. It was humbling, almost humiliating, but necessary. My rental income wasn't enough. My settlement money was tied up. Bills were due. For the first few weeks, I felt embarrassed every time someone recognized me. Neighbors, parents from my kids' school, old acquaintances. But here's what they didn't know. That job saved my life. It gave me structure, routine, a reason to get out of bed, a reminder that I still had value, even if my marriage had crumbled. And with the little income I earned, I kept the lights on, I kept food on the table, and most importantly, I began saving. Not much, sometimes only $50 a week. But it was the first brick in the empire I would one day build. The turning point came from a woman I met at my job, a senior customer named Denise. One afternoon, she stopped me as I was ringing up her items and said, "You have a calmness about you that people trust. You ever think about doing something with that?" I laughed, a hollow, tired laugh, because I felt anything but calm back then. But she wasn't joking. She leaned in and said, "Women like you don't stay down for long. You've got leadership in your bones. Can't you tell?" That sentence, that simple, casual sentence, changed everything. Leadership. The word felt foreign to me, like it belonged to someone stronger, more confident, more put together. But it also felt right, like a door slowly opening in my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words. Leadership, trust, women like you don't stay down. I started thinking about everything I had done during my marriage, all the things I had been good at without even realizing it. Budgeting, managing properties, helping friends with small business decisions, organizing community events, handling contracts, giving advice. Skills I never valued because my husband always overshadowed them, and because society tends to underestimate women like me. But now, suddenly, those skills looked like seeds, seeds I could plant, seeds that could grow, seeds that could become the beginning of something new. I invested the only extra money I had, $600, into an online certification program. Property management, real estate basics, small business strategy, financial literacy. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't some life-changing course, but it was something. Every night after my shift, I studied until my eyes burned. I took notes. I practiced. I learned. And slowly, I began to understand something powerful. I wasn't starting from scratch. I was starting from experience. All the years I spent supporting my husband's business, they weren't wasted. They were training. All the nights I stayed awake balancing budgets, training, All the problem solving I did while he traveled and disappeared into his lies. Training. I wasn't an abandoned wife. I was an underestimated strategist. And now, I was done being underestimated. After completing the certification, I got my first real taste of independence. A neighbor, an older widower, needed someone to manage his rental units. Just basic tasks, responding to tenants, collecting rent, arranging maintenance. He offered me $700 a month. That money changed everything. It was steady, reliable, empowering. Soon, another neighbor asked if I could handle hers. Then, a friend. Then, a coworker. Then someone who heard about me through word of mouth. Within 9 months, I was managing 14 units. That meant income, stability, control. But more importantly, it meant this: for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't relying on a man. I wasn't living in anyone's shadow. I wasn't the wife of someone. I wasn't the victim of betrayal. I was the CEO of my own life. One evening, after a long day, I opened an email from my ex. Another complaint, another attempt to interfere, another desperate attempt to feel relevant. For months, I had allowed his messages to affect me, to shake me, to make me question myself. But this time, I didn't feel anything. No anger, no sadness, no frustration. Just clarity. I wrote back one sentence: "Your chapter in my story is over." And then I blocked him. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, and I swear I could feel a weight lifting off my shoulders, the weight of years of manipulation, lies, disappointment, and fear. I wasn't healed yet, but I was healing. I was stronger, and I was ready to build the empire he never believed. I could ready to become the woman he thought I would never be without him, ready to rise. The first taste of independence was intoxicating. For the first time in almost 2 decades, I felt in control. I had money in my bank account that no one else could touch. I had the power to make decisions, to choose my schedule, to determine my life. But I quickly realized surviving wasn't enough. I wanted thriving. I wanted more than just paying bills and making it through each day. I wanted to build something lasting, something that would outlive the pain and the betrayal that had defined me for so long, something that would prove not to him, but to myself, that I was capable of greatness. Managing rental properties gave me confidence and stability, but I knew it wouldn't make me wealthy. It wouldn't create the kind of life I envisioned. So I asked myself a simple question one quiet Sunday afternoon while reviewing tenant emails: what am I really good at? The answer surprised me: guiding people. Over the years, I had been a mentor without knowing it. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers sought my advice. I solved problems efficiently, organized chaos, and could break complex issues into simple, actionable steps. And now, having experienced betrayal, survival, and financial rebuilding, I had credibility that I had never had before. I realized there was a market for helping women rebuild their lives after betrayal and financial loss. Women who, like me, had trusted too much, been blindsided, and now felt powerless. But I wasn't just going to offer advice. I was going to provide a blueprint, a structured path from despair to independence. I had no idea where to start. Social media was overwhelming. Websites seemed complicated. I didn't have millions to spend on marketing, but I did have storytelling, the one thing no money could buy. I began by writing. Every day, every night, every free moment, I shared my story raw, unpolished, real on a small blog. I wrote about betrayal, heartbreak, financial mistakes, and the first tentative steps toward independence. I talked about debt, about paying bills late, about the shame of being abandoned. But I also wrote about hope, about the first $50 I saved, the first client I secured, the first taste of freedom. It resonated. Emails started coming, private messages, comments on posts. Women shared their own struggles. They asked for advice. They wanted to know how I did it. And that was the spark. I realized I could turn my journey into a service, not just words, but programs, coaching, and resources for women like me. I had $1,200 in savings earmarked for growth. I invested it in a basic website platform and created my first online course, From Betrayal to Breakthrough, a step-by-step guide to rebuilding your life. It included modules on understanding and managing finances after betrayal, creating a personal budget and emergency fund, building confidence and mental resilience, exploring career and business opportunities, reclaiming personal identity and purpose. Marketed it humbly through my blog, a small newsletter, and social media groups. The first enrollment, 3 women, It wasn't much, but it was enough to validate the idea, enough to prove there were women who needed exactly what I had lived, learned, and could teach. From there, I didn't try to grow too fast. I made a list of every woman I knew, every community group, every online space where I could provide value first. I taught free workshops, webinars, and Q&A sessions. I built trust. I answered questions personally. I shared stories that weren't polished, weren't perfect, but were real. And slowly, my following grew. By the end of the first year, I had over 500 paying clients for workshops and courses, a social media following of 12,000 engaged women. A network of other women coaches and mentors collaborating with MIT wasn't overnight success. It was sweat, strategy, and consistency, but the confidence it gave me, priceless. The real breakthrough came when a mid-sized media company reached out. They had heard of my story and wanted me to speak at a virtual women's empowerment summit. I was terrified. Me, on a virtual stage, in front of hundreds, my voice shaking, my past, my vulnerability laid bare for all to see. But I said yes. I prepared obsessively. I practiced. I cried. I laughed. And I poured my heart into that speech. When I finished, the chat exploded. Hundreds of messages of gratitude, admiration, and stories from women who resonated with my journey flooded in. And then came the offer, a year-long partnership to provide coaching and content creation for their women's empowerment initiatives. The deal, $50,000 upfront. Suddenly, my tiny $600 investment into a certification program and my first course had snowballed into a major opportunity. With the confidence and capital from the media partnership, I expanded. I hired a small team to assistants, a content creator, and a finance advisor. I outsourced tasks that drained me, freeing myself to strategize, create, and mentor. I launched a subscription-based membership for women rebuilding after betrayal, a series of mini-courses on financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and personal development, a podcast to share stories and practical advice. The growth was exponential. The more women I helped, the more they recommended me. The word of mouth spread faster than I could have imagined, and each success fueled the next. Each milestone reinforced one truth. I could do this without him, without approval, without permission, without limits. Months later, I received a message, simple, short, calculated. Can we talk? I froze. I had spent years hurt by him, months rebuilding, countless hours transforming pain into power, and now, suddenly, he wanted to reconnect. I almost ignored it, but curiosity, that dangerous friend, got the better of me. We met in a neutral cafe. He was nervous, defensive, probably expecting pity or an easy conversation. Instead, he found a woman who no longer needed him, nor his validation. I listened, nodding, polite but firm. He tried to explain, justify, charm. He spoke about mistakes, regrets, loneliness. I smiled politely and said, "My chapter in this story is complete. I wish you well, but I'm building my empire. You are no longer part of it." It was calm, controlled, final, and it felt liberating. The months that followed were the most rewarding of my life. I scaled my business aggressively but intelligently, hired virtual assistants to handle client on, collaborated with influencers to expand my reach, created digital products that could scale without time for money limits, hosted live events and retreats. By the end of the second year, my annual income exceeded $500,000. My client base had grown internationally. My community of women powered, resilient, and independent numbered in the tens of thousands. More than money, though I had built credibility, freedom, and purpose. I could travel, I could explore new passions, I could make decisions without fear, I could invest in causes I cared about, and, most importantly, I had reclaimed my identity. Looking back, I realized betrayal was the cruelest and the most powerful teacher I've ever had. It taught me that strength is not always visible, but it exists in all of us, that independence is a mindset as much as a circumstance, that the people who try to break you often give you the fuel to rise, that resilience is built, step by step, choice by choice. I no longer define myself by my relationships. I define myself by my actions, my courage, and my impact. Betrayal had been the spark. Survival was the kindling, my empire, the roaring fire. Today, I stand in a penthouse office overlooking the city skyline. I glance at the photo on my desk, my daughter, smiling, proud. She sees me for the first time as a woman who can't be underestimated. I run a thriving coaching business, a growing digital education platform, and a tight-knit mentorship community. I mentor women from all over the world, guiding them from despair to independence, from fear to empowerment. I invest, I travel, I give back, and every day, I wake up grateful for the fire that betrayal ignited in me, that I don't miss the man who left. I don't long for the life I had. I have something far greater, myself, fully realized, unstoppable, and free. And that is how a shattered life became an unimaginable empire.